want to start by discussing a film which we've already seen and which we, quite frankly, had to come out here and pan a couple days ago. Edgar Wright's The Running Man.
Yeah, absolutely. You guys should check out our review of the film if you haven't. Gavin and I were very excited for this film. I'm an Edgar Wright guy. I'm an Edgar Wright believer. Up until this point, there hadn't been a film of his that I was truly disappointed by. I know that some people had mixed feelings about Last Night in Soho. Gavin articulated some of those on our last podcast about it, but I thought it was a good movie. I thought that he had a lot going for him. I thought he came across like a sophisticated artist in that film in a way that he absolutely did not in The Running Man. So I felt like it was a clear regression, the very Hollywoodification of Edgar Wright manifesting itself. And it seems like the audiences have rejected it outright. We talked about how this film had a massive budget with reports that it had over $250 million as a break-even point. That's an astronomical sum any year in the movie industry, but certainly in 2025 when films have been struggling to get those box office returns that they've known in the past. And Gavin, we're big fans of Jordan Rumi and the World of Real over here at Palm Dorks. He reports that Edgar Wright's The Running Man suffers a 70% drop, a full-blown disaster for Paramount.
Yep. And this was a big shock to me for a couple of reasons. Obviously, Glen Powell has been kind of sold to us as this new Brad Pitt or this new Tom Cruise. Everyone loves this guy. He's the new leading man action dude. Apparently not. This ain't good for Glen Powell, but it's also definitely not good for Edgar Wright. And you're right. Not only is this his first flop, but it's his first truly terrible film. The more I think about this movie, the more I sit on it, the more I really think it was a huge waste of potential in just about every way. It wants so desperately to be this smart, subversive kind of political satire, but there's nothing smart nor subversive about it. It misses every opportunity that comes its way to say anything interesting or truly insightful in the way that great science fiction should. And I'm also surprised that this is suffering such a gnarly fate at the box office, given the continued popularity of Stephen King stuff. Like Stephen King, to his credit, has really remained relevant as a creative force. And, usually movies based on his most iconic works perform really well. Obviously, the It films did really well. I think The Long Walk did pretty decently. Obviously, that film had a fraction of the budget that The Running Man had.
I think it made more money, though.
I think it did, too. And I saw a lot more people excited about it. I heard people talking about it in the weeks leading up to its release. This film totally came and went. And I do think, in addition to the film's middling quality, I think a huge part of the problem was that it just came out in a super crowded field of movies. There's a lot of bigger stuff coming out right around the same time. People were excited for movies like Wicked, and obviously all of these Oscar films. I think this film just really, it wasn't good enough to stand out from the crowd, and ultimately just got sort of lost in the noise of everything else. Again, it's not that great of a movie, so it's not like it really had much word of mouth to rely on either. But yeah, real L for basically everyone involved, and it's kind of stunning just how poorly this film has done.
Yeah, if we zoom in a little bit, we can take a look at the actual numbers for the nerds in the chat who want to see it with their own eyes. So The Running Man, as predicted, is in free fall, writes Jordan Rumi, likely to plunge at least 70% in its second weekend with a horrid $5 million take, which it did. This is a few days old. Running Man grossed an estimated $1.67 million on Friday from 3,534 locations. Estimated total domestic gross stands at 25 million, and overseas it's even worse, with its tally currently standing at 13 million. So that 38 million worldwide total is bad. Making things worse is that the film cost $110 million to produce, and what's even more astounding is that given its budget and relentless marketing, the recorded break-even point for this film is apparently $260 million plus. And Gavin and I can speak to that. We were in New York City earlier this month, and everywhere you looked, there was Glen Powell as the Running Man. That is not cheap. I'm talking on billboards, in Times Square, on top of taxi cabs, everywhere you went. I imagine it was similar in Los Angeles, other crowded parts of the country where they're going to advertise. And with that huge marketing budget, there was no return. So this film came out on, I believe, November 14th, right? So not that long ago. We're looking at its second weekend reports, but it never, ever, ever bumped Predator Badlands as the number one box office film for any day of the week. And then when it shared a release with Now You See Me, Now You Don't, uh, Now You See Me just completely ran away with it, absolutely curb stomping it. The third installment of a franchise I thought was dead and gone seems to have been revitalized. Audiences absolutely loved it. It dominated at the box office, and now Wicked for Good has come, and we're going to see Zootopia clobber the box office from everything this weekend moving forward. So, really, no hope for The Running Man. Anecdotally, one more final thing from me. I was looking at our local Cinemark. They're only showing it 5 times. So, not a lot of room left for it to make any money. Just going to be a $200 million loss for Paramount.
Yeah, and that kind of speaks to what I was talking about with it coming out in this crowded landscape. Predator Badlands, Now You See Me 3, which I actually was not surprised did as well as it did. This is actually a huge franchise just among total normies. Like
Interesting.
people in our kind of cinephile circles on film Twitter don't really talk about the Now You See Me movies, but I've actually been astounded by the amount of just normie, average moviegoers that are really into this series. It has a cult following, again, with more just normie folks who like the actors and think it's a fun time at the movies. I've seen the first one and they are kind of fun. I get it. I can understand why people like them, even though it's not for me. But yeah, putting The Running Man right between Predator Badlands, Now You See Me 3, Wicked for Good, and a slew of Oscar movies. It just wasn't a recipe for success. Ultimately, this feels more like a summer movie, if anything, with the kind of bright, vibrant action vibes of it. And ultimately, yeah, again, it just wasn't very good. It seemed way too generic and it totally got lost in the sea of other better things and just shit that people cared more about. So yeah, it's a huge disappointment. And honestly, I'm interested in your opinion on Edgar Wright's path forward because the first thing I thought about after seeing this movie and that I continue to believe he should do is call up his old buddies,
Simon
call
Pegg.
up Simon Pegg, and get the old band back together and go back to the basics. Maybe shoot in England again, right? Get back to something you're more familiar with, and I don't think that would necessarily represent a creative regression for Edgar Wright. If anything, I feel like that Running Man represents a real creative regression for Edgar Wright, him kind of operating more in sellout mode than anything else. So I think that not only for the sake of his artistic reputation, but also just his artistic spirit, right? This dude should get back to what he really does best, working with people he knows, trusts, and has a genuine rapport with, instead of a bunch of Hollywood suits and kind of corporate hacks that undeniably probably diluted whatever vision he started off with here. If he even had one at all. But I think that's what he should do. I'm not sure if he would be able to convince Simon Pegg and Nick Frost to come back for a reunion. But if they could figure out a good script and something that is not even necessarily part of the Cornetto trilogy, it doesn't have to be another movie of that vein, but just something that could feel more like a passion project, something that could really get these guys to enjoy the magic of filmmaking again in a little bit more of a small scale, low budget way.
Yeah, I completely agree. Whatever he does, it has to be more intimate, and he's going to have no choice but to make it lower budget. I don't know if Last Night in Soho made a fortune if it regained its cost. It didn't look like a cheap film to make, but it didn't have the massive budget that this did. But I guarantee you, he's not getting a swing at another $250 million project anytime soon. And I think that's for the best, right? I think that, Gavin, you're totally right. He is a guy that has basically I'd say tapered off in the Hollywood landscape. I liked Baby Driver, but I think there is a compelling argument that he really hit a fork in the road with his career, and the stuff that he did in England is really inspired and it's very unique and it has a lot more vision. And then the stuff that he did when he came to Hollywood was just much more Hollywood, right? Less inspired, less creative, with the new low being The Running Man. I completely agree. I'd like to see him go, and this could be projection because it's one of my favorite kinds of movies, but I'd love to see Edgar Wright revisit his roots in England and do a coming of age story. I think those are really cheap to make. I think he's the kind of guy that could really extract something from that, make them ornery British schoolboys, talk about where you came from, how did you grow up, were you what part of the crowd were you in? Can you imagine yourself in this kind of a landscape again, and make something that tells me who Edgar Wright is? And that's something that I feel like we haven't gotten in a long time from Edgar Wright, and something that's so important for auteur filmmakers, right? When I go and see a film that's done by Edgar Wright, I want to feel like I'm getting to know Edgar Wright. I want to feel like I'm getting to know something about him. And his most recent work felt so soulless. I would like to see him maybe go even deeper on the soul than he ever has.
Yeah, I think you're onto something there. I'd also just like to see him return to the world of comedy. I think that's where he really excels. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, most of his iconic films, whether we're talking about Shaun of the Dead or Hot Fuzz, Scott Pilgrim, I mean, these are funny movies, funny cult classic comedies of our era. And it seems like again, ever since he came to America with Baby Driver, Baby Driver has a lot of funny elements in it. Don't get me wrong, but then doing Last Night in Soho and now The Running Man, it seems like he's getting further and further away from his real skill set, almost like he's embarrassed by just making these British comedies or something, and he wants to prove himself as a real director. And it doesn't seem to be working out. It seems like the further he strays from what he knows and is really good at, the worse the results are. And I don't think there's anything wrong with sticking to what you know, what you love, and what you're again good at. In his case, that's the sort of movies that he made his name with, and I'd love to see a return to form instead of Baby Driver 2, which has been teased. And I say that as someone who likes the first Baby Driver, at least the first 75% of it. But I do not think a Baby Driver sequel is the way to go for Edgar Wright. For one, like basically everyone in that movie's been canceled. Ansel Elgort, Kevin Spacey. Obviously, there's some other people that haven't, but
He
it
killed
just
off the entire cast too.
yeah, a lot of people died. The ending of the film doesn't really seem like it would make much sense for a sequel this soon. So I don't know. I hope that's not the direction he goes in, because if he makes a sequel to Baby Driver and that flops, then we're really looking at a bad place for Edgar Wright, who does deserve a comeback. The dude is a very talented filmmaker, and at his best, he makes really vibrant, memorable cinema.